All right. Welcome, Gaurav. I know we're going to be chatting about a lot of things today, especially around AI use cases and where it works, where it doesn't. But maybe if you want to kick off with a quick introduction and we'll go from there.
Yes, hi Vimal. Thanks for this opportunity to talk to you about this today. So yes, Gaurav Rawal. I head up, just very recently switched sort of my role a little bit where I head up all of the debt technologies for PGM Real Estate. In parallel to that, or that's really still in transition, my purview has really been kind of the engineering with both the debt and the equity business within PGIM. I've been with Prudential, which is an arm of PGIM, for over 20 years now, done various things throughout my career. Started off with something simple prior to us having any sophisticated system, just building out simple data warehouses. Success of that kind of led to other things, other opportunities within the organization, where we now have a pretty solid platform across the board that's used by all functional groups. So yeah, again, looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, and we should do a session on data warehouses at some point. I feel like people stop talking about them, and they're awesome and they're powerful and they're still needed, but it's not the cool topic, so we'll stick to that today. So I'd love to hear from your perspective, like, have you seen like an AI use case in real estate that has worked in your workflow or tangentially to you? And an honest take as well, like, are we there yet?
Yeah, very good question. I mean, the honest take on that is we are almost there. I would say there are several use cases in the books, right? Anything from, how do I abstract information from my leases? How do I be asked questions off of my appraisals and valuations? How do I, look across multiple loan agreements to try to understand, rate caps and things across the board? So there are a lot of different use cases, Vimal, that are currently in flight. The challenge is none of that is actually productionalized at this point, right? We are close.
Agreed.
Yeah. We are close in that all of the pieces are getting put into place, whether it's the data itself, whether it's taking documents. I mean, luckily, our business, our platform has done a very good job historically. Again, going back to some of the decisions on the platform that we've made, some proprietary decisions that we made to grow it in-house has enabled us to have that information available to us in terms of, millions of documents and all of the structured data. The challenge now, or what we're working through now, is how do we take that, ingest it, create chunks, create embeddings based on the questions, and then on the outside of it, on the other side of it, enable kind of that Q&A capability. I would say, it sounds simple in terms of, well, why can I not just take a document and drag it into a Copilot, for example, right? It sounds simple, and it is simple in that sense. Where we get into the complexity of it is you don't want to just have a user take one single document outside of your system, drag it into Copilot, and just be able to, Q&A off of that. You want to provide the ability, I mean, it's layers, there are layers to it. The top layer, the North Star, the ideal scenario that we're aiming for is, imagine a user is already in a particular system. I should be able to say, I want to know the cap rate or something used for this multifamily property type in Atlanta. So think about all the orchestration that it has to do first. It has to understand, first of all, who you are, what information should you even have access to. There's a security layer. Then it has to determine, okay, I want to find all of the properties, multifamily properties in Atlanta or wherever else. And then of those, this particular question I asked resides in this type of documents, these particular document types. And I have to go find those document types. And of those documents now, then I have to go do, search against their embeddings and do that to pull that out, send that information to an LLM to get an answer. So there's this chain, pretty complex chain that has to be enabled for this really to be meaningful. Very different than just pop it into a Copilot and ask a question on that one document, for example.
Yeah. So when you first said this is not productionalized, I thought you were actually going a different direction where you said it's not productionalized because the accuracy or the trust factor is not there, which is where a lot of people go. But you went down the path of it's not productionalized because it's complex and it has many small parts, which is fascinating. And I want to dig into that because I agree. Every task needs to be decomposed to the smallest task for higher success, and then it's a lot of things that need to be stitched back together. But if we take the whole trust thing, that's not a blocker. That's just a analysis paralysis, a boil the ocean problem. Is there a reason that people don't start taking 1, 2, 3 steps immediately that we're not talking about.
So, in terms of why people are not taking one or two of the smaller steps, I mean, I think the answer is they, in fact, are taking those small steps. If you're especially referring to why do I not take my document and pop it into Copilot and get an answer, right? That does actually happen already because that is very accessible, right? So, from that sense, you're absolutely right. People are using it to some extent. Accuracy, I think, is still questionable. There is a trust deficit there where we have to achieve. We are looking at ways, how do we, if we, outside of Copilot, if we use more sophisticated techniques to create the chunks and the better models, do we get higher accuracy? So that is part of this experimentation. But going back to the question, there are steps people are already taking. Like they do have access to Copilot. Really, what I was referring it to, how do you scale this up? Right? This is a scaling issue to me. We have these operational systems that everybody lives in. How do we enable the functionality at scale with higher accuracy? Again, that is also part of the equation to achieve better accuracy while you're within that system that you're working on a day-to-day basis. Right? So when I talked about we haven't productionalized or operationalized, it's really that the scaled version of this, not the one-off. Yeah, I mean everybody has Copilot. They can.
Yeah. But even you mentioned a lot of things in there that I'm sure that you guys have done at your scale, right? Which is like just being able to read documents and classify them, right? AI is really great at that. And then you started to create like a better SharePoint, a better source system. You mentioned a data warehouse. So something, like a data dictionary that sits on top of that that's auto updated by AI. You could build these like, in my head, and what we've seen is that you could build these core components independently of the bigger picture, knowing that in 5 years, you'll be able to connect the dots on all of these together. From your perspective, being an industry, and I come from a consulting perspective, is there value in tackling those use cases over the next couple of years, knowing that you could transformer them together?
Yeah, no, I think you put it well. This is actually a discussion I was having with somebody yesterday. We should be thinking about this in layers, right? You can think about it almost agentically, right? Your first agent could very well be, let's not worry about a user asking a very kind of a ambiguous question, right? Let's just give them ability, going back to, from a scaled perspective, you're already in a system, you have access to all of these documents. What if I let them pick 10 documents, and then you still enable that Q&A meaningfully, again, not in Copilot, but a scaled version of it. And then later on, you can layer on this ability, again, maybe agentically speaking, you can layer it on where you start with, find me my answers within documents, and then the second layer becomes, now help me determine what documents I should even care about. The system should automatically care about, find those. So you're absolutely right. These, in fact, should be built incrementally and in those layers that you described. And I'm just talking about this is kind of the unstructured data of, the world of documents.
Right.
The structured data, that's another whole other basket we're in parallel trying to experiment with.
Got it. Do you find structured to be easier, harder in the world of AI?
Surprisingly, structured seems a little more difficult. And I would say it depends on your data models. It depends on what kind of semantic models you already have. Depends, the accessibility of that information. For us, part of the challenge from a structured data, maybe it's less of a technical challenge. It is more of really thinking through, again, almost at a record level, what you should even be able to have access to, right?
Right.
So we're thinking about what if we create essentially these data products, data sets that are abstracted, create semantic layers on top of our data that are specific to certain use cases or certain functional areas. Like we have a core business or an agency business. What if there's an agency data set that we can expose and then orchestrate it? When a user asks that question, we know what their persona is. We use that agency data set, versus a core. There's a lot of that orchestration that we're still trying to brainstorm and work through.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people are, and I think you guys are on the right track because we ended up right back at data warehouse, right? That was the concept. You have your data warehouse and then you have your data marts, and the marts have the smaller contained data for like finance and for accounting. And from there, you could even get into smaller marts, or now we have like row level security. So those technical components have been around pre-AI. And I'm hoping we could leverage those with AI. But again, like you mentioned, it needs to be thoughtful, because if you don't get that right and it could bypass that security, then you're pulling data from a wider subset of data for hallucination, or more importantly, information you shouldn't be looking at. So I agree. Yeah, like especially when you get to like your company size and scale, this cannot be an afterthought.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things, in fact, on the structured data, we are again experimenting a lot, right? Looking at Fabric, for example,
Right.
right? We publish data sets in Fabric. We implemented, we created a few agents, and it produces DAX, whatever the query is, right? In terms of it gives you here's the result, and here's the query that it generated to come up with those results. And then with that information, we're writing basically, again, we have pretty well-defined data schemas and structures in place. Luckily, we're writing, basically SQL queries to validate, okay, did I get the right response?
Yeah.
That the AI just gave me a response. Can I go validate what my top tenants are in Dallas? The top 10.
Oh yeah, I love that, right? And that's so powerful, and I think that's a step that a lot of people skip, because it's essentially you're now it's like evals almost, right, to a degree, where you have the AI response, you have the SQL query. The SQL query, as long as it's been written correctly, is correct, and then you could do that at scale, right? Just be like, do this 100 times over. And continue to enhance my prompt or my processes, knowing what the answer is going to be. And then, my next wildcard question for you is there a world where you take the human out? Because, you're talking about them asking questions. Real estate, the metrics we work with haven't changed in, I don't know, 50 years, maybe some very long time frame, right? So every question you're going to ask, I'm going to wager is one that's been asked before. Sure. Occupancy, tenant over time, budgets variance. Do we still need the humans to ask questions? Should the AI not have the inventory of the 1,000 questions? And over time, if somebody asks the same questions 5 times, it gets added to the inventory. Do we move to a point where the analysis itself, we don't even need DAX queries or SQL queries if we could get the semantic model right and the book of queries right?
Yeah, I mean that's a very valid point. There is a finite universe of known things that people will want to know about. Yes, of course, there's always these ad hoc one-off things, but generally speaking, it is a finite number. Do we get to that point? Of course, I think we do get to that point. Are we there yet? I don't think we're nearly there yet. Again, going back to this it is going to be an exponential curve in terms of implementation, right? Where we are experimenting here, trying to solve some of the challenges. It may be in a few weeks or a few months. Now, all of a sudden, you have all of these other use cases implemented. So the period from where we are today, we're not there yet, to what you just described where we could get to, it may in fact be short relative terms, right? But we're certainly not at a point, I would say, where we can say, yeah, humans are not in the loop.
Got it. And well, I definitely didn't mean to minimalize it, right? Because obviously, every shop we walk into, everyone does accounting differently. Fund accounting's done differently. The centers, commercial properties, like the variance of how people look at their own information, their underwriting models changes. So there'll still be secret sauce at every spot, but we're hoping some level of that be extracted. Like, do my IRRs, do I have a work order problem today, right? Like that question could be asked for anyone that has multifamily properties the same way.
Yeah. And Vimal, you have to also wonder how much of this is going to be just a human behavior issue of, even if it is giving you a right answer, 5 times you got something out, are you going to be 100% confident that the 6th time it's still right? So this is more of an adoption human behavior challenge more than even, whether the accuracy of the models themselves, if that makes sense.
I got you back to where I thought you were going to go originally, and that's exactly it. Is that it's if it's going to be wrong one time, right? It's always that analogy. If somebody gave you a bag of Skittles and said one of these is like cyanide, you're not going to eat the entire. You're just going to put the whole bag down, right? That's right. So it feels like we're in that mode as well. And the human in the loop seems to be the default answer. It seems like that's what you're seeing as well. But it'll be an interesting 5-10 years. Yeah.
One area I will say where we have sort of operationalized, it's less about using LLMs, more about machine learning and just, deep learning. It is really looking at sort of the re-rating, re-underwriting processes of a lot of our loans, right? That is more of a machine learning where it can take in input from other market data, other market sources, look at historical values that we already have, and be able to come up with, quality ratings, right? Yeah. So we have a fairly sophisticated, rules-based engine. So we've looked at how do we take that rules-based, while that's still running in parallel, how can we also use ML to come up with right ratings and project NOIs or whatever. So we've done that, and in fact, we're doing some kind of QC on that as we speak. So that's another area that's
fruitful.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. Yeah, that's, I feel like that has lost the publicity, and it's still, the classic ML AI use case is still very powerful. Insurance companies, real estate companies, Google Maps, all of it is still based on those fundamentals. They've just become so good that they're just sort of baked into so many things that we don't realize them anymore. And I'm hoping Agentic gets to that point as well, where they're using ML and Agentic at the same time. But yeah, I agree. Let's give ML the love it needs, and it has the bridges. It's awesome. Well, I know we're almost out of time. I kind of want to wrap with one question here, if you don't mind. It's been great. We could probably go for like an hour if we let it keep going. Advice to like mid-sized companies, right? So that have a little bit more flexibility on. I don't want to use the word compliance, but there's a little bit less red tape. Like, what's one workflow that you feel like is a good investment to make now that 6 months down the line won't get wiped out by a model upgrade?
I don't know if there's one particular investment, but I would say what companies, especially if you don't have too many thick boundary walls around you, you have to start experimenting. Be pragmatic, of course, right? Don't assume that all AI and LLMs are not going to solve all your problems. I mean, that's just the reality of it, right? We should not go in with that mindset. So be pragmatic, but have to start experimenting. Take documents that you have, put aside the fact that you can pop it into, again, going back to where we started, putting into a Copilot. Let's say you have a repository somewhere, start working towards how do I chunk this? How do I orchestrate that end-to-end workflow across all of them? You don't want to limit yourself to a single document type. You can start there, but that should not be, don't pigeonhole yourself into that, and really, really start to experiment with this. A lot of good tools out there. It's honestly just a matter of playing with it. That's what I would advise anybody to do at this point.
Yeah. I feel like the curious learner has the advantage. That's been the theme of all of these sessions we've done, is that whoever's the most curious has become the expert.
Yeah, and get a hold of your data. If you don't have good structured data, if you don't have, again, a good repository, a well-indexed repo of your documents, start there. That's foundational to any of this.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate the time today. This was really helpful. I love riffing on these things. Yeah. Gaurav, thanks so much again.
Anytime, Vimal. Really appreciate it.
All right. Have a good day.
See ya.